Yeah. The announcements. So you know what you're getting into.
Yeah, good. All right.
All right. I'm just gonna go ahead and start us off. Hello, everybody. My name is Isaac Vega with Rose Gauntlet Entertainment, and I have here with me today Ken Jenkins, who is a designer for Rose Gauntlet and has worked on a couple games for us, Turn Up and Flock. And we're here to talk today a little bit more about the Bird series, and as well just a little bit of questions that we've been given to go ahead and answer, and just kind of give you guys a little bit of an insight as to who we are as designers, and so you can get to know us a little bit more. So Ken, I'm going to go ahead and start us off with the first question that we were
Yes.
given. When did you realize you wanted tabletop gaming to be a part of your life?
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I've been going further and further back in my life, trying to identify like when
Yeah.
that happened, and realizing that there's never a point at which it wasn't part of who I was and what I was doing with my time. And that's everything from in high school playing, in middle school actually playing Magic the Gathering. I can remember back when I was in grade school, I had this game called Atmosphere, where you had this video cassette that you put into a VCR that
Oh,
would narrate while you were playing your game. Like it was still a roll and move game, but it was like every once in a while the harbinger, the gatekeeper, whoever he was, would be like, "Stop! Now you have to do this thing." And it was just this very novel approach to that sort of game. And then going into college, I played a lot of miniature war games. I played Pirates of the Spanish Main, this little constructible ship game,
ah,
and then I got into Monster Apocalypse, a game where monsters were duking it out in a city, and I like kaiju quite a bit. You know
yes.
that.
You have it tattooed on your body. So.
Yeah, so that one spoke to me. So but that was what brought me to Gen Con for the first time, and that was I think 2008, and that was like just one of the most magical and exciting weekends that I had ever had.
Yeah.
And even though I wasn't playing like tabletop games, I was playing miniature games, but you can't help but stumble over all this other stuff that's going on. And that was probably the point that I was like, I'm pretty into this. I
Right.
think that this is something that I'm going to do forever,
Yeah.
seriously. But that was probably the changeover point, and then it just got to be more and more of the people that I loved being around, the community and the culture and the attitude towards life and the world and everything. Like it was a place that I felt very welcome. And I know that your entry into it was a little different. So what does that look like for you? How did that?
Yeah, so like for me, I certainly had similar experiences. Like I in middle school, I definitely played card games. I was into Magic, I was into Dragon Ball Z. Um, but it never really felt like it was a part of who I was. It was something that was just passing with friends and just like who I was with in the moment because I could never really afford to have it. And like in my household, like the only game that we really had on hand was like an old copy of Monopoly that my siblings would absolutely hate playing with me because I was the only one actually engaged.
Yep.
So they do everything within their power to make sure I was not going to win. So board games and tabletop games in general just didn't seem like it was something that I was super engaged with until after I came back from college. And saw that my friends that were used to introduce me to Magic the Gathering, those kind of dueling card games, had transitioned to board games really, really hard. And I was just like, I didn't even know this world existed. Like I had no idea that people that there were games like Dominion or Puerto Rico, or that there were actively making new board games. Board games just kind of felt like this thing that just had always been,
Yeah.
right? Like, and it's just like, ah, that's what they are, and then no one's ever necessarily making new ones, or and to kind of have the doors open to me and shown like, no, this is a very active, robust industry, and lots of new things are happening all the time was just mind-blowing to me. And it wasn't very long after that. It was like within 6 months that I was just like, I love this. This is so engaging for me. I really enjoy this. I really want to keep doing this. And I started making my own games shortly after that, right? So it was like pretty early. I caught the bug as soon as I knew what it was and knew it existed. But yeah, like your story definitely seems to resonate with a lot of people that grew up with games, right? Like, and I didn't really get that much of an experience, but I know that a lot of households had that opportunity, and it would have been really interesting to see how I would have gravitated towards games, or when would have been that like spark point for me, because it all just came at once.
Yeah, that it's almost the like uh, it's something that you don't realize is a big part of your experience until you're looking back versus when it is such a revelation and such a like shift, an inflection point in your life, then you can say like it was this date, you know,
Right.
and and mine was kind of that gradual, like it was almost inevitable that I was going to end up in this place. But uh, yeah, I think that it's so cool that there's so many different ways to come to this community and be invested in it and be excited about it.
Yeah. So that kind of it dives into our next question. So we met at the First Shucks, and we have been exactly great artwork by Quan Chai.
Yeah, thank you, Kwanchai.
Yes. So we met at the First Shucks. It was a fantastic experience. And I love that show. I'm so sad that show is not currently active.
R.I.P.
But we've had lots of wonderful memories through that. And I've known you as a longtime fan of board games and tabletop in general. Yeah, I mean, you've gotten into the scene so far that you've been like competitive and winning tournaments and doing an amazing job there. But what was that tipping point for you in saying, "Hey, I want to now take my skills that I've accumulated in being a super fan and now
Yeah,
become a designer?"
yeah, and that's I genuinely I do think that it was my association with you, and through you, like I met a lot of other people
Mhm.
and quickly kind of uh not intentionally, very accidentally, like found myself hanging out with a lot of designers,
Yeah.
and it's part and parcel of that environment to be talking about like, well, what am I, what are we doing here, and like, what's the driver here, and why this mechanism, and that's something that I've always enjoyed, seeing how things work, and then wondering, can I make this work better? And I come to that from a physical therapy, exercise science. Um, I studied geology and philosophy, so there's a lot of different approaches that all kind of have similar attitudes towards, you know, how do we look at what's happening and see if there's a different way that we can make that occur and make it maybe smoother and more engaging and easier. And so I think that very much there was kind of a, we met in 2017, so 18, 19, like after a couple of years of hanging out with that group of people, I was like, well, I've been commenting a lot on what they're doing in their games, but it's really easy to critique somebody else's work. I better have something that I've done, so that I can really appreciate and understand what they're doing.
Mm.
And so I started working on a tarot game that I've shown you.
Yeah.
It's on the back burner right now. It's on the shelf right
Right.
now. It's still there. It's still like my brain still kind of goes that place sometimes. Like, what if you? And I'm like, that's a good idea. I'm going to write it down and I'm going to come back to it later because that's not what I'm working on right now. But I started working on that, and then that was as much as anything. That was just a kind of an exercise for myself. That was something that was kind of fun to fiddle around with, but it wasn't something that I was taking super seriously. And just as I started to kind of get serious about playtesting that and working on it and trying to actually like make it into something, all my playtesters dried up. Like I couldn't get anybody to come play my game in 2020. I don't know.
The constant struggle as a designer.
Yeah, and it it was just that much worse because no one was leaving their houses.
Yeah. Yeah.
so so coming back together as things started to open back up and coming back to the scene, it was something that I kind of said, well, that was cool to kind of play around with, but I'm not sure that I'm taking that's something that I have,
Mm.
the capacity, the bandwidth for. But a lot of things in my life changed between 2020 and I guess it was 2021 when you did your first BIPOC lounge.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
yeah? So going and helping set that up and getting more involved in the kind of the Rose Garland Foundation stuff that you were doing and trying to support that stuff. Um, there was a conversation that we had like just over a year ago at Gen Con where you were talking about like, I'm wanting to build up what Rose Gauntlet is doing and like really expand and focus on helping people come together. And so I need some smaller games that are focused on people interacting. I was like, all right, I'll keep an eye out for anybody that's making that kind of game. And then I got home and I was like, well, why can't I make that kind of
Right.
game? And that was really kind of, I said, I'll just give it a shot. I'll just take a swing at it. And when we got back together, later in that year, and we were able to start like, looking at some designs and looking at some stuff that I was working on, you're like, hey man, this is good stuff.
Mhm.
Like, keep going. That was when I was kind of like, all right, yeah, I want to do this. I want this to be something that I devote a significant portion of my energy and time to doing because it's very fulfilling making something, creating something, and then seeing that out in the world. But I feel like been talking about my journey for a long time, and it's a very short journey. So, like, tell me, what I know some of the story. I've heard some bits and pieces, but like, tell
Right.
me how you got there. Like, what was the tipping point?
Yeah, so for me, like I said, like it was a very short process in between the discovery of tabletop as an actual industry and a thing, to just jumping into it. My life was very transit in a transition point. When I
Yeah,
first discovered board games, I had come back after dropping out of college in Arizona and kind of felt very much like lost. So I was just, doing odd jobs here and there. I had originally wanted to go to school, was going to school for video game design and found out that that just wasn't for me because I didn't actually get to do any of the aspects of design. I I had to make 3D models or I had to program for other people's dreams, but I didn't get to actually work on my own. So it wasn't something that I knew I would find a passion in unless I could go ahead and go into that aspect. And when I got back home, I thought my life, the creative part of my life was just like, oh, that's gone. Like, I have to be serious. I have to get money. I have to just do anything I possibly can to get a normal job. Right. And when my friends introduced me to this, I was just like, whoa, like, this is just pieces of paper and cardboard. I can figure some of this out. I can put some of these things together. I can go ahead and play around with some of that stuff. And it just gave me an insight into an entire world that I could go ahead and start playing around with more control of myself. Like during that time period, video games had become so big. It was like the world of like EA and like all these triple A style studios, and the indie scene wasn't really a thing yet.
yeah,
Hadn't really blown up like it had in the years later. So making games felt like this gargantuan task that whole teams and millions of dollars and everything needed to be behind. But this suddenly shifted my thinking and it's like this is possible for me. I can go
yeah,
ahead and start playing around with systems and creating something that people will be able to enjoy and be able to enjoy quickly. And that just made me start working on stuff and it's like, okay, I'm going to put that in front of my friends. And then lo and behold, randomly, my mother came home with a business card because another person had started a studio in her church, and that happened to be Colby from Plaid Hat Games. And I was just like, well, might as well take a chance.
right place, right time, man.
Right place, right time. And go over and show him what I was working on, and he didn't like the game that I was working on, but was very encouraging of my design journey. And then I kept going to his game nights, and eventually, a few months later, showed him something else, and he was like, that's it. That's the one. Keep working on that. And that's something that I would be interested in signing. And then that turned into City of Remnants. So it wasn't really a long period of time in between those different transitions.
Yeah.
But once I got that game signed, I was just like, whoa, like this can be a real thing for me. I can actually do this. But it wasn't actually until my second game that I felt like a designer. It was like my first game was just like, okay, that was a fun moment. I don't know if it's real yet because of how
Yeah.
long it takes from
One.
design point to the actual game on the market,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But when BioShock came along and I was signing it completely transitioned my thought process around what it was to be a designer and whether or not it could be my future
Yeah.
because it was a way for me to step into the world that I had been previously wanting to get into. Lo and behold, like here I am, like being able to step into Irrational Studios, one of the hottest video game companies at the time, and I got there through board games. So it was just
So
so weird.
yeah, that's yeah, man. That's something that I've always respected and loved about you is that you've always done it your way and you've always wanted to be telling a story and sharing that story with people and inviting them in.
Yeah,
Um, and that when one thing doesn't work, you say that's okay, and you try something else. And it's been very cool getting to know you and getting to see that firsthand. So I just wanted to compliment you on that. I don't know
oh,
if I do
I
that
appreciate
enough.
I appreciate that. Yeah, like the way I view games is my opportunity to build a little world in a box.
Yeah.
Always, I've always thought of them that way. So bringing them to life in interesting ways. The mechanics matter to me. I want them to be fun, but it's how do I tell this story? How do I bring this to life? No matter what
Yeah.
thing is,
and
right?
I think that
Other
that's
things can die along the way
yeah,
in order for that to be true.
yeah, that's I think that's one of the really interesting ways in so many ways. You and I are on at like these different ends of the
Mhm.
spectrum on our attitudes towards games and our background in games and like just so many ways like we diverge so much,
Right.
but because of those differences it creates this really cool synthesis between us where you're very much like I'm going to tell a story and we're going to figure out how to make the mechanics work to tell that story. And I'm very much like I want there to be a story that makes these mechanics make sense.
Right.
and but like because I come to you and I've got this thing that I've streamlined it and it's very technical and like it fits together like a little clockwork. And you're like, is that fun? I'm like, I'll be back in a minute. And I've noted like I've been very happy to be able to contribute sometimes where you've been doing a bunch of stuff and I'm just like, hey, I'm excited about this story, but like the way that I'm getting there is getting in my way. Could it be smoother like this? And you're just like, absolutely. And in fact, I'm gonna shift this here and move this here. And how does that feel? I'm like, that feels really that's real nice. That's good.
When you were talking about your story, one of the things that I wanted to point out is like you were saying, it's like, oh man, like here I am giving commentary for so long, but I haven't been jumping into it my own. And it's like, Ken, you were like all like looking back and understanding you were always top tier as like understanding the true like intention behind the design and being able to cut away things that were getting in the way of that and
Thank you.
understanding how to get to the fun in the quickest way possible without losing the crunch of what you want to give players and without losing that added level of fun. You know how to get to the fun in the quickest, smoothest way possible. And what I love about you is you've been able to help me elevate my designs and make them cleaner, make them slicker, and you really see a way to get there in a way that's really opened my mind in how I can approach designs as well. So I really appreciate your design acumen as well. And you've always had this, and it's just now coming to fruition as a designer. But it's like it's so awesome to be part of that journey and see that journey and see that growth there. But you've had a mind around games in a way that's been far more given more evaluation to games than I even have had that opportunity because you've really been in this for a while as a
Yeah,
super,
thank you.
right?
Thank you very
So
much.
talking about those awesome ways that we got to the point of design, let's talk about the designs that we're here to talk about today, the Bird series.
Yeah.
The game that you've been working on is Flock for the Bird
Yes.
series. I wanted you to give us a quick little synopsis of what Flock's all about, and so players can kind of get an understanding of your process into designing Flock and why Flock might be something they should check out.
Yeah. So Flock is a rummy style game, and for any of the people following along at home that don't immediately understand what rummy style game means, a rummy game is normally with a basic deck of cards. You have a hand of cards, and you're trying to get rid of those cards in sets of at least three, and that can be three of the same number or three of the same suit in a row. Uh, it's sequentially. So I grew up playing rummy, and I've been carrying around this idea of like what can I do with a rummy style game that hasn't been done before. And when you were talking to me about like, hey, I've got this kind of area control trick taking game, and I was like, ooh,
Mhm.
that's very cool. I've got this stacking game where like the thing that you're stacking on is also moving, and like the way that you stack matter. I was like, ooh, that's cool. You're like, I want a bird game, and I was like, well, I've been thinking about this rummy thing where you can kind of steal cards from each other. What if those were birds flocking around, like flying from place to place? And so I started working on that basic premise. And I think I was at your place,
Yeah.
and and it was like,
Which-
kind of cobbled together the basic ideas and showed it to you. And you're like, yeah, go finish working on that. that's the juice right there. So Flock is a rummy style game where you're building these sets, but the big innovative twist, the big alterations to that basic understanding is normally in Rummy, you can interact with like one or more of the discarded cards, but you have to like put them in your hand and like take on that burden, and then you can maybe get rid of them. But that creates a lot of variability. So I said like, hey, the discard pile is a fairly limited pile, but it counts as part of your hand, kind of taken from Texas Hold'em. The flop is now part of what you're playing with on your turn. And then the other big innovation was that we introduced these feather tokens that make it so that you can kind of modify or alter the suit of the cards that you're playing with, or that you can take more actions than you would normally be allowed to, or you can draw some more cards. So you have a lot of options to mitigate when you're in a bad position. Like if you get a bad draw, like yeah, that's in normal game of rummy, like you just got a bad draw
right.
and you might just eat that hand.
Yeah, I really love that innovation with the flock tokens because it helps you have a lot more strategy in
Yeah.
situations like other more classic card games in which you just have to deal with the fact that I'm going to lose this hand. This is not going
This
to
hand's
work
gonna
out.
suck. I'm gonna have a bad time this hand.
But now it
And
kind of elevates the entire experience to be able like, okay, based on how I go ahead and use the resources in front of me, I may be able to take a bad hand into a fantastic hand.
and that's and that's something that I really, and like I'm not gonna answer this right now. There's I know that there's some questions that we've got coming up later that
Yeah, yeah,
but so the basic idea is it's rummy. You have a hand of cards. You're trying to get those cards in front of you in sets of three or more, either three of the same number or three in a row of the same suit. But you can modify that with these feather tokens. You're playing with the discard in the center of the table as part of your hand, and then you can steal cards from other players. Other players can steal cards from you. But in doing that, like it creates the internal economy of the game. And so it's not just a feel bad straight ahead. It's kind of like everybody kind of gets a little bit out of that.
right.
And so then you play a few hands of that, and whoever has the most points at the end is the winner. And it's very much a game that is made for people that grew up playing card games, or like grew up with other people that played card games and want to bring them into the world of modern board games with something that feels a little bit more familiar, feels a little bit cozy, a little bit nostalgic.
Yeah, and I thought that was a fantastic compliment to the series that I was trying to get off the ground for Rook Gauntlet.
Trying to
So
get it to
talk a
take
little
flight.
bit more about the other games.
Yeah.
Pebbles, Rook Requiem, and Birds on Birds, which I was the lead designer on all of those. Um, I had originally come up with a concept because I was so enamored by Cat in the Box and what Cat in the Box was doing with its trick taking concepts. But it turned out that I was playing Cat in the Box wrong. And it actually didn't have a lot of the aspects of what I enjoyed happening
Yeah.
in the game because someone taught me the wrong way. But it's just like, oh, well, this would be a really cool concept of being able to utilize different trick taking card or a trick taking game to have other elements be affected. And that's what kind of inspired Pebbles to show to be able to bring a kind of simplistic trick taking mechanics, but also how can those cards have dual uses? How can you feel again kind of bringing more strategy to traditional card games and
Yeah.
giving those cards an added layer. So in Pebbles, you are taking on the role of penguins trying to find love. And it's a little simple trick-taking area control game in which you are trying to take over different territories, you're trying to collect different pebbles, and you're trying to gain heart tokens by winning tricks. And you're able to do that by playing out your card, but your card also has these additional actions that you can choose to utilize as you're playing out the card. But you also want to win the trick. So you have to figure out whether or not you want to play a card to win the trick. Do you want to play a card in order to execute a good action? Do you want to play a card to place your unit in the right location? Right.
Yeah.
So figuring out how to utilize your hand in the best way is really the strategy around Pebbles. And it comes in this really cute, adorable package that I'm really happy to kind of bring to life as well.
Yeah.
And then with
And
Birds on
that's
Birds, oh, go ahead.
yeah. Well, so no, um, I thought it was when you showed it to me the first time because I remember the conversation. I think that when we played Cat in the Box together,
Yeah.
we played it and we got done, and you were just like, I I had a totally different understanding of how this game worked. Okay, like because in my version, you got to do the area control, but like the
Right.
drawing the lines on the board. I was like, oh, yeah, that does actually sound really good. You're like, I'm gonna make something about that.
Right.
So the next time that I saw you, you had this prototype, and you're like, yeah, you're taking over these spaces, and you're trying to get these pebbles, and you're moving around and doing this stuff, and the cars can do one or two, or like you got all the. I was like, this is really cool, and I think that it's. I was thinking about this the other day, just that it's in the industry. There are certain like trends and um, certain events that you see happen. Like there for a while, trick taking games were everywhere. I think that All Play released like six in a row. They've got and every one of them is good. Like all of these trick taking games have these cool mechanics that are doing like fascinating things. And I think that trick taking games inherently are such a great like system for trying out really clever new ideas.
Mhm.
Um, and so when I started hearing about arcs from Cole Whirl and
Right.
the leader games team,
Which
I
I
was like,
still have yet to play. I really want to. I have it on my shelf.
which is so wild because like I've played a fair bit of Pebbles and
Yeah.
I've played arcs now, and arcs is this like unhinged tensegrity structure of like interlocking systems that because of the way they interlock, like they build themselves up into this, swaying system that at any moment you're convinced is going to fall apart, but somehow it stays upright and it holds together. Um, but there's so many little nuances and caveats and exceptions that enter into the equation when you're playing that game. Um, and simultaneously and like but if you reduce it to its simplest explanation, it's a trick taking game with area control.
Hmm.
And then over here, like you've got Pebbles, and it's wild to me because so many of the things that you were doing in Pebbles were things that are in arcs, but then like you were looking at it and going, that's really cool, but I feel like it's creating more complexity where I want less
Right.
complexity.
Right.
And so like having played them both, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, Pebbles is Arcs light. It's more like Arcs is a game for people that really want to like just sit down and slam their head against a game. they 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 want to hurt a little bit afterwards. They want to get in. But, but Pebbles like manages to do so many similar things, and it feels like having afternoon tea. You
Mhm.
know, like there's some little finger sandwiches and some delightful conversation, and there's like a fountain in the background. It's just so pleasant. And it's light in the way that you want something that's refreshing and wonderful and nutritive and fulfilling to be. And I think that that's so cool that like those two things are, if you break them down to their basic components, they're very similar, but then they're totally different experiences in practice.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, and that kind of goes into the entire approach of what the Bird series is completely about. Like,
Yes.
Rose Gauntlet really wanted to have brands under its name that were able to kind of push outside of the industry diehards, right? Like,
Yes.
we have some games that certainly have really engaged lots of people that are in the industry but are still kind of a little bit on the lighter side.
Yeah.
But I wanted to engage people like my sister, people that don't really play games, people that have never really heard of the board game industry, people like where I was right in the beginning,
Yeah.
right? And to give them opportunities to kind of learn some of these concepts in familiar ways. And I think one of the other reasons that trick taking is such a way for people to be able to engage in gaming, and the reason why they become so popular as ways to kind of play around with mechanics is because so many people, at least in American culture, have some sort of experience with a trick-taking game
Absolutely.
in their youth or in their family or at some point in their history. So it's a great way to kind of like you've approached this type of mechanic before. Let's go ahead and twist that a little bit. Let's go ahead and add a little bit more to
Hmm.
that. And with the series as a whole, I really wanted to be able to speak to those kinds of players who may not know what Gen Con is, may not know
Yeah.
what the tabletop industry, may not even know like that tabletop games are even coming out. But it's one of those games that I can ease. I'd always been asked by other people, like if I'm getting my hair cut or if I'm going out to the dentist or something like that. People ask me like, what are your games, like what's your stuff? Oh, here's my website, here's stuff. But I
Yeah.
know like some of them have no concept that board games are even a thing anymore outside of Monopoly. So I wanted to make sure that we had something that spoke to them. And I
Yes.
felt like the Bird series was very much something that would speak to that audience as well, that is interested in what we're doing, is
Yeah.
interested in what we're trying to bring to the table. But we want to make sure that we can meet them where they're at and bring things, give a bridge to something that may have been familiar in their past.
Yeah.
Which takes me into the next game that I was going to talk
Yeah.
about, Birds on Birds. Dexterity games. Dexterity games have this beautiful way of being able to just engage everyone at every age level. They really kind of like bring the kid out in every person.
Yes.
I
Yes.
wanted Rose Gauntlet to definitely have a solid dexterity game under its belt. And Birds on Birds helps bring that to the table in a very fun and silly way. I
Yeah.
thought the concept of kind of like stacking different birds on this tree and that are all upset that they can't all fit in in the tree in a really neat way was a really cute little idea, and I
Yeah.
wanted to see it come to life. But man, like I had never touched designing a dexterity game before, and like designing a dexterity game is like whoa. But being able to kind of put these different things together, bring these kind of birds to life, sketch them out, gave me so much joy.
Yeah.
And with Birds on Birds, the entire concept is it's a dexterity game. It's pretty straightforward in that aspect where you're stacking birds on top of birds. But its little twist is that you're actually trying to get a higher score, and it kind of get to a score area instead of just losing all your birds. That's one way
Yeah.
of winning as well. But the score aspect, I think, really helps the dexterity game not outlive its welcome. There are so many dexterity games that people just kind of like pieces are falling, 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 and like it's just like okay, like nobody's really progressing, or nobody knows who's going to win. And I just wanted to make sure that the game was, a good tight 30 minutes. So
Yeah.
adding the scoring element let people always have that sense of progression, but also feel like they're still getting the full experience of what a dexterity game is all about. You had introduced me to a game called Viking Seesaw, and I
Yes.
really enjoyed the concept of like the seesawing a platform of you placing things on. So that was some element that I wanted to kind of bring to Birds on Birds as well. And I thought it was perfect with the swaying tree.
Yes.
Kind of give a little bit of that aspect. We didn't have as much of a crazy jerk as Viking Seesaw because it kind of Viking Seesaw certainly I think still kind of like in the gamers game kind of
It's
element.
definitely like I
Uh,
can
uh,
show it to people that aren't gamers and
right.
they vibe with it, but it's like there's a lot of like planning and forethought and
Yeah.
consideration of where and how you like there's a lot going on there that looks
Exactly.
very
So I
simple.
wanted to have a little bit of a lighter touch
Yeah.
there. So it doesn't have quite the dirt. And I wanted to see these birds stack up in a cool way.
Yeah.
So I've really enjoyed working on that one. I think people were really going to connect with it. And what's been lovely to see is that people understand it right away.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about that game. And then lastly, I kind of wanted to have another game to kind of round out the series. And we had been going back and forth, talking quite a bit about how do we have
How do we do
a Corvid style game,
that?
like
Yeah.
so.
What do we do there?
Right, right. And you had inspired me with kind of like looking at historic games like Rummy. And that kind of made me start thinking, it's like, what other historic games that maybe people haven't touched as much? And Rook kind of shot to minds. And I was like, okay, there's a lot. I've played similar games to this. There's lots of cool trick-taking elements in this. But I wanted to elevate it and kind of take it to another level and make it a little bit spookier. Because again,
Yeah.
I'm all about the world, building the
Yes.
world, and I wanted to
Best
have a
story.
little bit of a touchstone for everyone. So we
Yeah.
got the silliness with Birds on Birds. We got the nice chill island vibes with Flock. We got we got a interesting Bridgerton style level of
Yeah. Pride and Prejudice and Penguins.
right, Pride, Prejudice, and Penguins with Pebbles. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of the gothic, a little bit of the spook.
Yeah.
And that's where I was like looking into the history of corvids, looking into kind of the legends around those types of birds, and seeing how they kind of help spirits go to the afterlife. And that's
Yeah.
where I kind of
Psychopomps. Yeah.
start bringing the concept in of the ghost and how it could change up the classic game of Rook in those style of trick taking games as well. So in Rook, you are taking on the role of trying to gather as many spirits as possible, and you're going to be able to score points based on those. But each of the spirits are changing up the gameplay in a little bit of way, and you're trying to utilize the trick taking aspect in order to win the trick, in order to gain the ghost. But there might be ghosts that you don't want to take because they
Yeah.
can be negative victory points as well. There might be ghosts that you want to combo in certain ways in order to gain more victory points or be able to take or you don't want to win as many tricks because having less ghosts might be able to get you more victory points. So it's just a fun twist on something that felt very familiar, but also gave, again, that elevation to the story that I kind of wanted to bring to life
Yeah.
and gave people another opportunity to kind of like jump into something that's familiar, but not, but still elevates the gameplay a little bit as well.
Yeah. Still, and I think that one of the things that from the get go that you're like, I'm building this, I'm making this, but I'm making it so that you can still play like the classic game with it. So
Exactly.
if you want to if you want to just dip your toe in the water,
Right.
you can do a little bit, but
Right.
then you can do a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit, and all of a sudden you're playing like a full blown, totally changed over classic card game. And I always thought that that was cool as you were kind of working on that. Uh, just appealing to as much of the audience as possible, but also inviting so many different people in from different experience levels to come try something out and realize like, hey, it doesn't have to be super complicated to
Hmm.
be very engaging and very fun.
Right.
And
Both of
that's
and both of us tried we had even more games. We're trying to get into the series and get going. But these were truly the four that kind of rose to the top and
Yeah.
accomplished a goal of what we wanted with the Bird series was making sure that we had something that what felt a little familiar was more approachable and gave Rose Gauntlet the ability to be able to introduce gaming into potentially a new audience that we haven't quite been able to reach yet, or at least be able to take these games and be able to approach people that may not know what gaming is all about. And
Yeah.
I
And
think
that's
all of the games accomplish that in really interesting and different ways.
agreed. And that, that's something that I've always enjoyed in the way that I've cultivated my collection, and something that I appreciate about designers that can kind of straddle that line. Pardon me. Can kind of straddle that line of it's thoroughly engaging and challenging for someone who's been playing games for a long time. Like
Mhm.
there's plenty there, but someone who hasn't been doing that can still sit down, understand how it works, get excited about it, discover some things about how it works, and want to come back to it again.
Right.
And I do sometimes worry about some of the games that I see that are coming out that are just so challenging, so opaque. Because I look back at when I was what 9 or 10 trying to learn Magic the Gathering,
Right.
and it was just like you read through the manual. I read it cover to cover, and I was still just like, I'm not sure if I could do what I'm supposed to do correctly. Um, and that's a tough, that makes it, that really turns away a lot of people that could be enjoying this hobby with
Right.
us,
Right.
just because there's so much barrier to entry. And I know that we've talked a lot about it, but like that was very much an overarching goal with the Bird series, was just remove the barrier to entry, open the doors, extend a hand to just about anybody, and say like, hey, like you can play. Like these aren't. It's not impossible to learn. It's not. It doesn't have to be super complicated to really still be compelling.
Right.
Uh, and I think that's what's so cool about all four games is that they're simple, but they're not easy,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
exactly.
that's so cool.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the process and the thought of where we were at and why we wanted to design these games and what they're about. So I wanted to ask you, which part of the design process brought you the most joy?
Uh, there are two parts.
Hmm.
Can I give a two-part answer? So I've got a really good friend, Nicole, that I went to physical therapy school with. And like you've met Nicole a couple times, but Nicole's real bright, right? Like she works at Johns Hopkins. She's done super advanced research on concussion rehabilitation and stuff. Like she's very intelligent, but she doesn't really play board games. Like that's not something she plays board games when she and I hang out.
Right.
And that's pretty much the extent of it. Um, so I introduced an early version of Flock and had her playing it, and she kicked our teeth in. It was like me and you and a couple of other designer friends of ours. So there's four game designers sitting at a table, and Nicole wiped the floor with us.
Yes, she did.
And I don't know about you, but like I had this moment of doubt where I was like, did I just is the game not is it totally imbalanced? Is it just luck? I don't what just happened? And two, I was like, am I bad at games? Are all four of us bad at this? And Nicole is just really good. Like I don't understand what's happening. Um, and so I like dealt another hand, and you guys played again, and I just dealt myself out, and she won again, and I was finally like, what's going on here? And she was like, man, I played a ton of Rummy growing up, and this feels so familiar.
Yeah.
I feel so at home, like so excited playing this. I like this so much. Um, I can't wait to see this. And I was like, well, that feels incredible because like, my friend that isn't excited about board games is suddenly excited about something that I'm making. Like I'm the one making it. And she was like, hell yeah, this is my bit. Like I love this. So that was a huge point for me. And then as I had gotten it really tightened up and really kind of like closed all the gaps in the design that I wanted to close, I had it over at a friend's house and they were playing, and one of our mutual friends was there playing it. He had not seen it at any point in the design process. This was his first introduction to it, and it got to his turn. It was like his second turn of the game, and he goes, "Okay, if I understand this correctly, I can do this." And I was like, "That's yep, you sure can." He goes, "And then I can do this." I said, "You yes." And he's like, "And then if I do this thing here, I can do this third." And I was like, "You absolutely can." He's like, "This is one of the coolest card games I've ever played." Like he was just, and it was so cool getting to see him unlock it in real time in his mind. Like, oh, that's this revelatory, insight. But that didn't mean that he had solved the puzzle, so he was done with it. That was when he was like, oh, I get it now. Now I can really start interacting with the game because I understand what I can do and what everyone else can do. And so those were the two like big touchstone moments that come up when I'm thinking about the design process and when I felt just like unbridled joy about working on this is, you know, seeing people resonate with it so intently and so deeply uh, that I was like, yes, this is gonna be really special for people to get and like have at their house.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had lots of little moments of joy as well, but I think the thing that tops number one is that we had recently made some new friends, me and my partner, and had made some new friends, and they're just finding out, oh, you're a board game designer, you're making stuff, and usually like when I'm meeting new people and they're like they don't have any concept of board games and stuff like that, it's really hard to like pitch my games or like
yeah,
bring them to the table because it's like okay, it's like I don't know how they're gonna react to this kind of stuff. Like this stuff is pretty crunchy or big and stuff like that. And I was able to bring over multiple games from the Bird series and just put them on the table, and they just clicked.
yeah,
Just clicked, and they went and they had a fantastic time the entire time. And I was just like, this is doing exactly what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to be able to engage people, and they like it didn't matter that they were prototypes. It didn't matter that it wasn't quite the finished product. They were just having a ball, and that is always, I think, the part of most joy for a designer is when people get it and they get it just right away without feeling like you have to explain something or something's wrong or things like that. And it's just
yeah.
it just takes such a weight off your shoulders. It's like I did it right.
Okay, all right, it works. It works, and they like it. And they're having fun. They're connecting. That's so critical. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's just it's doing exactly what I love. Games have the opportunity of doing is it helped us get to know each other, right? Like we didn't know these people very well at all, and now we consider them really good friends, right? Like and hanging out with them quite a bit, and I just love that when my games are able to do that and able to do that with for more people is always my goal. So I'm really glad that we're kind of expanding into a little bit of a different audience, but just as valid and just as interesting as an audience to try to enjoy games in every capacity, right?
yeah,
All right, so let's go ahead and move. Did you ever face some moments talking about our joy? All right,
yeah.
let's talk about the moments that didn't work. Have you ever faced a moment where you doubted the game would work, and what kept you going?
Um, I mean, there was the moment where I genuinely thought that maybe I designed something that was just a luck based game, um, and I think that there were plenty of moments where I would add something or subtract something, or I would sit down and play it with a group of people, and they might not immediately grok it, and as a result of that, like someone at the table might have a bad time, um, and there have been plenty of moments. I was playing it in Memphis actually with a group of people, and one of my good friends, Kristen, who she and I have been buddies for a long time and have played a lot of really deep, detailed, cooperative games. She and I always play Pandemic when we're together. She just doesn't like that type of game.
Mhm.
And she played it and she was like, I don't know if I like it. And I was like, well, yeah, I noticed like you didn't like do this thing or like try this thing. Did you just not want to try those things, or did you know that they were an option? And she's like, you know, um, I didn't try that, and I think that probably I didn't give it a good shake. I'm interested in trying it again. Maybe not tonight, but like I'm interested in giving this another shot. And like there was that sense of, maybe I haven't designed a game that is compelling enough for gamers.
Mm.
Um, but the flip side of that is another friend down in Memphis, Wes, who, is probably he has one of the largest collections of board games you've been. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
he's played everything. He texted me and was like, "Man, Flock is quickly becoming like one of my go-to. Like, I don't even have a copy of it, but it's becoming one of my go-to like pub games. Just like getting together and having a good time games." And I just wanted to let you know that, man. And like it was just he was just apparently at home thinking about like which games go on that list, and he like reached out to me. So there, in the course of this one, I guess that there hasn't ever been a moment where I was really seriously doubting it, because every step of the way I've had somebody in my corner encouraging me, you and Nicole, and like so many people that have played it and said like, this is really cool. And so I guess that there wasn't ever a moment where I was like, I don't think this is going to work. But there were lots of moments where I thought this isn't as good as it could be.
Yeah.
And I guess that is the thing that has kept pushing me to keep on making it better. So that was more of my experience. But I know that there were a couple of times where you, like especially with Rook Requiem, there was one moment where I
Oh
knew that we
yeah.
were like,
Rook Requiem saw a lot of iterations. It went all the way from like super super complicated and all these different moving parts, and then coming back down to the bare nothing. And what really kind of kept me going in that situation, because there were lots of moments where people actually said, I don't like this, right? Like and I was just like, oh no, what have I done? All right, is this something that we need to pitch? This doesn't work for the series, right? And I think honestly what helped get me through it is kind of going back to your design acumen and your design philosophy, and really cutting away at the fat, like looking at the things that really weren't engaging people, and
yeah,
but really elevating the things that were. And
yeah,
the ghost were something that were always working, right?
yep,
People really really enjoyed the ghost, and I was like, I need to make this the main feature. I need to cut away all the other stuff and make this the main feature, because there were too many other things going
there
on.
was a lot.
And, but once like I just kind of focused on that and really gave them their opportunity to shine, it completely turned
Yeah,
around people's
yeah,
opinions.
it
And they
was so
really
much
started loving
smoother.
the game. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that was Rook. Luckily enough, Birds on Birds has been a dream to decide.
yeah,
And people have liked that game since the beginning. It's just like, okay, a little tweak here, a little adjustment there. Really, the hardest part with the dexterity game is like, did I get this shape right?
yes. Is this? Can I
Does
stack this shape?
right.
Does this shape stack?
Right, exactly. Does the shape stack? Is the wood correct? Like those are the things that are like, but like that has been a fantastic experience. Pebbles had some issues too. Like I think really the biggest thing that was like people were not engaged when the game was like so much longer. Like we wanted to have multiple rounds. I kept trying to integrate the feeling of a trick-taking game where it's just like you're going through multiple hands and multiple
Yeah,
rounds of what's going on, and that just wasn't working for this game. It wasn't
yeah,
accomplishing what that game needed to be. But that was a part of so much frustration, because I kind of felt like it was integral to what a trick-taking game was,
yeah,
in some sort of way. But it's just like once I started accepting, no, it's just one round. It's just one round. It's a sweet short opportunity to kind of have a little bit of trick taking game, but it gives you a light area control experience. That's when it would just sung. Like
yes,
so
yes.
really like when it comes to like what kept me going, and it's like I'm stubborn. It's like at this point you have to be.
Yeah, 100%.
Like
Yes,
I'm
yeah. No,
stubborn.
that's
Like I have to figure this out. It's not the game for me is making sure the game works,
yes,
right?
yeah,
So I
Yeah,
have to figure it out. So
no, that was cool. I think that of the games that I got to see and got to be involved in, I think Pebbles is the one that I've seen the widest variety of
mhm,
approaches and fundamental expectations of what that would feel like. And I know, I know that we had a lot of long conversations about what are you trying to accomplish with it? Like, what is the core goal?
mhm,
Um, and I think that was, you know, anytime that you go into making anything, if you have preconceived notions about what has to be included, like what you like, it has to have this feature and this feature and this
right,
feature, then you can get in your own way.
yeah,
And the more that we like stepped back from it, it was like, what do you what do you want the experience to be? And what matters most to you in turn, like, cost benefit, which part matters most to you to really express what you were setting out to do here. When we started trimming away at that and then emphasizing like does the player get to make a cool decision? Does the player have a cool option space without being overwhelmed?
right.
And that was when it really like that it started to coalesce into this thing. And when you were finally like, you know what? I've got all these bells and whistles that I don't think that I need. What if I got rid of this? And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like, what if I got rid of this? I was like, I don't see any reason that you have to have that for the game to work well.
Right.
And like each piece that we kind of said, like, like we decided that this had to be in the game because it's in these other games, but it's not actually contributing anything to the fundamental experience. And the more that happened, the more that what you were actually making shined through.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really cool. There was a moment where that all of that really started to fall into place. And I was like, yes, this is the one. This is it.
And I think that perfectly segues into our next question. And we've talked a little bit about some of the aspects here already, but when players are playing your game, like what are you hoping players feel when they play your game?
Yeah, and I think that this is probably the thing that you and I are closest on
Hmm.
is any design that I make. I want players to feel connected and engaged with the people that they're at the table with.
Yeah.
And as part of that, like I want them to feel clever and I want them to be able to appreciate the cleverness, the impressive plays of other people at the table. When someone does something that's really smart that you can, you're like, there's a little bit of chagrin because you're in competition, but simultaneously it's like that was really cool that you pulled that off.
Yeah.
That was really neat. Like there's not a lot of cost to me, but I got to watch you do it, and I learned something from seeing you do it. But I also, I can appreciate it because now I get to do my thing, and my thing's gonna, impinge on that or bounce off that or interact with that in some way. Um, so I want players to feel connected and I want them to feel clever. And I think that with Flock, like that definitely shines through. But I know that you're more of a storyteller than I am. So like, what do you
Well,
want
I
to play?
think I think we're certainly on the same page with that on the whole series as a whole.
Yeah.
But also like I think in particular, Rook Requiem also is very much trying to accomplish that feeling, right? How I feel clever and where I can think on my feet, right?
Yes.
Especially when things are changing up from turn to turn. And
Mm-hmm.
how do I leverage my hand? So I certainly want players to feel clever and elevate in an elevated way with
Yeah.
Rook. With Pebbles, the thing that I really wanted to also have players feel is because I feel like area control gets like a bad rap in our industry in a lot of ways. Like it feels like a game. I feel like a lot of people decide whether or not they're in the area control camp or they're not. They kind of just like, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna go ahead and it's like I hate all area control.
Yeah. Like dudes on a map? No, I don't play
Yeah.
that.
So I feel like people really turn off to it. And with Pebbles, what I really want players to feel, especially the players that have an understanding of like area control, is that area control can be approachable. Area control can be really fun, and it can be light and airy and interesting. And I have seen so many people react to Pebbles that way now, and I'm loving seeing that. I'm loving having people feel like yes, it can feel a little bit more breezy. It can be a little bit foreign. I think like the aspect of like you not losing your characters and just kind of pushing them around really helps with that. And
Yes, very much.
the theming really brings that world to light. But and the Bridgerton kind of scandally Pride and Prejudice kind of feel certainly gives that love aspect of, and the
Mhm.
love concept as well really brings that together. So I really love that Pebbles is giving that kind of area control another touch point and another
Yeah, just
point for a lot of
yeah,
people
something
that
that
may
isn't.
feel intimidated by area control.
Yeah, it's not so contentious. There's not so much like, oh, I'm just gonna have a bad time. Like everyone's gonna gang up and like kill all my dudes, and I'm just gonna sit here and do nothing. Like, yeah, I can see why someone would get turned off to that if they played Game of Thrones as their first area control game
Right, exactly.
and just had a miserable experience. But like, it's kind of hard to have a miserable experience playing Pebbles.
Exactly.
It's kind of hard to do.
And then with Birds on Birds, I just want people is like, I want to play again. I want to
Yeah,
play again. I want, and I have seen so much of that. Like, I want it to be this quick, breezy dexterity game where people are just engaged. They love what they're doing, and they're just like, yes, one more round, one
yeah.
more game, let's do it. And I've so enjoyed that, and just the feeling of awe of like walking by the table. It was like, what's going on here? Why are those birds
Dude,
so
I didn't tell you this. I
grumpy?
didn't. So at Gen Con, okay, I'm at the backer kit booth demoing
Yeah.
Flock and demo and like we've got Birds on Birds just set up on the table. And I finally had to like put Birds on Birds away. I just had to put it away because of how many times like people just they'd be walking past and they would stop and start fiddling with the bird, and I'd be in the middle of like explaining how Flock worked and like guiding people through their turn and stuff, and there would just be somebody like fiddling with these birds, and it would do like I finally was just like, okay, I'm gonna put this has got the exposure it needs for right now.
Right.
And I because it was just it's such a fun little game. Like
Yeah.
it's and
Yeah.
people just vibe with it. My little sister already ordered a copy. She was like, "Oh, I'm getting Birds on Birds." She's got a toddler. She showed a picture to her toddler and she was like, "Birds!" And so like, yeah, she's pumped about that one. She's like, "Why didn't you tell me about this earlier?" I was like, it honestly just didn't even occur to me that like that would be okay for her to play with. She's like, I'll just take the eggs out. Like it's gonna be great. So the fact that my sister is just like pumped about this bird stacking game, I think it's really neat. I think it speaks a lot to that game. It elicits joy.
Yeah, yeah, and I've had a lot of people reach out as well, just ordering copies as gifts for friends, and I'm just like, like, why are you getting this for your family? Like, why are like so? It's just like it is definitely it's kind of dexterity games have such a fun toy factor,
Yeah,
and like I just really enjoy the reactions that I've been seeing with the aesthetic and the design of the game. It's just been amazing. So,
yeah, it's really cool.
I'm so glad that that feeling has come across because it's certainly what I wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into some personal stuff. All right, let's go deep. So we both love gaming. We both
Yes.
met through gaming.
Yes.
We've become great friends through gaming
Yeah.
and really appreciate the impact that it's had on our life. So what game in your experience has had the most significant impact on your life?
It's pandemic.
Yeah, I
Like
thought that was gonna be your answer.
it was like I genuinely like I struggle with. I was like, there's a lot of games that have really influenced like how I think about. But no, it's pandemic.
Mhm.
I played. I think that I had the first edition in 2008. Like I had the early box art original version, and um, you know, pandemic made me a better communicator.
Mm.
Right? Like I was super guilty of being the alpha gamer, uh, telling everybody, where they need to go, what they need to do. Because I've got the best idea, right? I know the game best.
I
And I want to win. And that game, my wife and my friends, they're finally like, "Hey, man, it's a lot more fun if like we get to do stuff." And I was like, "Oh man, I'm being a jerk." And so it's made me a better communicator. It's made me a better collaborator. Like I'm a lot more able to ask questions and gather information and get insights into how other people are thinking about stuff and why they're thinking about it the way that they're thinking about it. And obviously, like I won a couple of tournaments in pandemic, and that allowed me to go see Germany and Spain. Like there are very few games that I can say like, yeah, I played this board game because I really liked it a lot, and I won a thing, and then I got to go to another country to play it there. So that was, there's been so many really phenomenal experiences because of playing pandemic, and Pandemic is one of the games that I have in my personal pantheon of simple components, simple design, emergent elegance
yeah.
as a result of those interlocking parts. It's 2 decks of cards, 48 cubes, I think, 72, and a couple of pawns, and that's it, and a map. But out of that emerges this like compelling puzzle. And seeing the expansions that like Matt and Tom Lehman put together, in the lab is the one that for me is the end all be all of these expansions because it enlarges the collaboration aspect, it enlarges the communication and coordination, and it increases immersion. And it's all that it is just adding a little sideboard with 5 little spaces and then some card arrays.
Mhm.
But like that simple little addition really just amps everything up and elevates everything. And it very truly informs a lot of my consideration on, you know, are when I see another game that has an expansion, does the expansion add something that's really driving the game to a higher level, or is it just kind of more stuff to do?
Yeah.
And that's made me think a lot about how these games function and how they work. And because of that love for Pandemic, like I got to meet Matt Leacock a couple of times, and he and I have spent time hanging out and working on designs and just getting to talk to him, getting to like ask him questions about his process and stuff. That's made me look really hard at what I'm doing and why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing it. And he, like you, is also just a really wonderful human being and does like really great, amazing stuff in the world and in the communities around that he's part of. Um, so yeah, Pandemic is very much that's the one. That's the one that really does it for me. But I know that I've never actually heard your answer to this question.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
excited.
honestly, when I got this question, I was just like, it took me a while to really kind of like understand what my answer would be because I am I guess a serial gamer. Like I just go from new game to new game to new game,
Yeah,
trying to always absorb as many things as possible. But I really want to. I feel that the best and most true answer for this is going back to the beginning and really looking at the games that influenced like what kind of sparked the design
mm-hmm.
process for me. And for me, Dominion really sticks out as something that really influenced my life and my understanding of like how gaming could really kind of shift something on its head.
Yeah,
And Dominion did this fantastic thing where it took this thing that people thought, oh, it's like this is just the pre-game.
yeah,
I feel like this is you're just building a deck and taking that and seeing the fun and the joy and the interest in building something, right?
yeah,
Putting those mechanics together and making gamifying that. And I always thought that that was such a beautiful and interesting approach to kind of seeing what gaming can be, kind of stretching what gaming can be and how to play around with the things that we all do naturally, or that the things that we kind of are all able to kind of maybe see as not gaming and bring
yeah,
it to gaming, right?
yeah,
And Dominion was a huge inspiration in my first game, like City Remnants, right? And without that game, I don't think I would be here, right? So it had quite a significant influence in my life. It's a game that I don't touch as often, but I always love going back to when I do, just
Yeah.
the nostalgia and the interest of what's going on there. And as a designer, I can always point to it, always still will scratch an itch for me because it's almost the experience of design. Building a deck feels like
Yes.
process of designing something because you're trying to figure out what things can I put together to have a really interesting outcome,
Yeah.
right? And I love how that game is able to do that and what all of the different things that inspired from that point on, right? Like
Oh
that's
yeah.
that truly changed the industry in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like still a touchstone. The thing that I would love to bring to the industry is something that does that domino effect. I did a little bit with the Crossroads series, but I want to do it more. I want to do it mechanic.
Yeah. 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 No, I hear you because that's.
All right.
I'll make an admission right here, right now. Of the foundational games, Dominion's the only one that I haven't played.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. All
That's.
right. Well, then I guess
So
there,
we'll make a date to do that next time I'm in
dust
town.
off my copy and let's get going.
Yeah. Because it's because that's Carcassonne and Seven Wonders and Catan and like Pandemic, all of those things that are kind of the genesis point for what I think of as like the modern board game hobby. That
Right.
was the only one that I just like no one in my groups, no one that I knew, nobody that I just never had exposure to it. And I'm kind of like what you said. It was just the deck building part of the game. Like I like building Magic decks or Arkham Horror LCG decks, or there's so many things that I did in that environment. It was kind of like Seven Wonders. I've been to a lot of Magic drafts, so wait, we're just doing the draft part. We're not doing the actual play. It's just the draft. That's so weird. But yeah, Dominion's the only one that I have never played. So I guess you gotta teach me.
Will do. Will do. Happy to. All right, so let's dive in a little bit deeper and find out like we are in the business of entertainment. We are making things in order to inspire and help other people just get through their day, enjoy their day, bring a little happiness to their lives. And I'm sure there are always things that I find outside of gaming that help inspire gaming and
Yeah.
get to know you a little bit better. Like, I'd love to hear about either one book, movie, or song that's maybe changed the way that you see the world, and helps you in potentially your design, or at least who you are as a person.
Yeah, that's man. I saw that this question was coming up, and I
It's
struggled.
hard.
Yeah,
There's so
because
many.
that's
We're both such absorbers of entertainment and interesting things, so it's just like
yes. Just one thing, because like I mean,
one. You only have
yeah.
so much
I
time.
have one, but you know how much I read. Like
Oh,
I read so much. Um, so I think not necessarily, at a fundamental level, change the way that I see the world, but Nation by Terry Pratchett really helped crystallize a lot of things that I had struggled to parse or navigate in my own experience of life and tragedy and loss and community and caring and how to just be a good human being,
hmm.
and how to do that in a complicated and difficult world. I think that Nation, oh, I have to be careful talking about it, or I'll start crying. I think that Nation really, it really dove into so many of those topics and helped me step back from prejudices or frustrations or negative experiences that I had had, and just build a little bit more compassion and empathy, um, and cultivate you know uh, that outwardly as well as inward. Because I think that that's one of the most difficult things that we can do as people is be compassionate and kind and supportive of our own faults and frailties, and recognize them and work on them without hating ourselves for having them. And that book really helped to do a lot of that for me. So That's my one book. Nation by Terry Pratchett would be my answer.
Love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. What about you?
For me, again, very hard question to answer. There's so many things that I could point to that have had an impact on my life, and just goes to show the power of creators, and what they can
Yeah.
do for people. Um, but one of the movies slash it's technically a miniseries, a two-part miniseries, that I always go back to and think very fondly on, and makes me really think and reflect on life in a lot of interesting ways, is an old TV series called Merlin, starring Sam Neill. Most people have probably never heard of this and never seen it.
I'm
um,
so excited to go watch this now. I
yes,
didn't, yeah, I know nothing
I
about this.
highly encourage you to do so. And what was lovely about that is it goes over the entire life cycle of Merlin, the our Arthurian lore wizard, and focusing in on him and his struggles
Yeah.
of trying to, grow up, learn magic, and also erase Arthur, and all of the ups and downs of what that was for him, and all the way to the point of his old age and the loss of magic and how that all changed the world, and
Huh.
the different touchstone points in which he had in his life, and the struggles and decisions that he had to make. Um, and what I love so deeply about that miniseries is I am always a sucker for stories that go through the entire span of someone's life.
Yeah.
And because it really kind of like, I don't know, connects me to a story and really kind of just shows the frailty of what being a human being is all about. Um, and what I loved about this is how it showed, despite this one man who, like, no one else really has as much magic or much power as Merlin in this situation, is able to like still has struggles. It doesn't matter what you're able to accomplish.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're able to build for yourself. It doesn't matter how powerful you become, and what you're able. Things are going to fall apart. Things are going to fail. You may not get the love of your life. You may not be able to um, make everything work. You may not be able to save a nation. You may not be able to influence things in the way that you hope. And you will make hard, critical mistakes that
Yeah.
may haunt you,
Yeah.
right? And despite all that, you can still have a beautiful life, and a beautiful a story to be told,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
And you are the only one that really knows your story. The way the man, I almost don't want to spoil it for you since you haven't
Don't
seen it.
spoil it. Don't spoil it.
I
I'm
won't
gonna
say
go
it.
watch it.
I won't
This is,
say,
yeah.
but the ending, I'd love to talk to you about it at some point, because it's really interesting on how they decide to end the series. But
Good on it.
yeah, I highly suggest that people check it out. I think it's just King Arthur is something that most people have always heard about.
Yeah.
It's been redone so many times, but I thought it was such a beautiful touch point to focus in on Merlin himself and focus in on his life story. And Sam Neill is just one of my favorite actors of all
He's so
time.
good.
He's
He's so
so
good.
fantastic, and he just elevates the series so much. But there's
Yeah.
so many fantastic. Martin Short is in it as well, and he does a fantastic job.
What is this series? How, like, what?
You need to watch it. It's
Okay.
fantastic.
Yeah, it's on the docket.
Yeah,
That's in the
yeah.
queue now.
So I highly suggest people check it out. But it's certainly had an influence for me. Me and my brothers talk about it all the time. But it's one of those movies that I go back to every once in a while and just like,
Yeah.
yep,
Check in.
life is hard, but it's
Yeah.
beautiful and
That's
so
cool.
interesting. All right, so we talked a lot about gaming. We talked about what we've been working on. Um, but you and me for sure, like, I think where gaming really sits in our life is how does it help elevate happiness in our own lives, and the happiness around the people that we enjoy, and how are we through our designs putting more happiness and joy into the world,
Absolutely.
right? So I wanted to kind of have end this on how do we define happiness and how do we define it for yourself?
Yeah. Man, I can we go back to talking about how to design games?
I know this is hard, but
Yeah,
you know me, I like to get to the
I
heart.
know, I know. Like it's 15 minutes into hanging out with Isaac. So what do you think it's like if we die? Can I finish my coffee? No. um, no, I think that happiness. I've been actually spending a lot of time thinking about this recently.
Mhm.
For me, happiness is being surrounded by people that hold me accountable and push me to be better, while also understanding that I'm only human. Um, and building those relationships and communities wherever I can. And it's there's a lot of activities that I like to do, and those activities bring a lot of happiness and engagement to my life. But a huge part of that is the people that I'm doing those activities with,
Yeah.
and that's true of board gaming and jujitsu and exercise and camping and travel and like all of these things. All those things would be really great. They'd be really cool to go do. And like if I had an unlimited amount of money, I'd do all these things. But those things really, they're enjoyable. They like bring fulfillment and happiness to my life when I'm doing them with people that I respect and that respect me, and that we want everyone to get better and to be healthy and well,
Yeah.
and that we can have hard conversations about how what does that look like and how does that work and how do we get there. um and for me, it's hard to find those people, but when you do, you realize that the hobby, whatever that hobby is, the hobby is a vehicle, it's a mechanism to build those communities. And that's one of the reasons that I love gaming so much, that I love tabletop gaming so much, is because it is replete. It is heavily populated by people that you know they've struggled and they've been ostracized and they've been excluded, and as a result of that, they are welcoming.
Yeah.
They've chosen not to be the person that pushed them away. They've chosen to be the person that they needed. And when you have a whole community of people that are acting that way, then you see everyone getting better, everyone healing and improving and growing and thriving. And so thriving people help other people thrive.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
that's happiness
I
for me.
love that, Ken. And honestly, I cannot say it better myself. That was beautiful. We've been
Thank you.
friends for such a long time that we're on the same page about
Yeah.
it. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad that you're a person that is in my life that offers that kind of support and gives me immense happiness. And I hope that I am able to do that for you as well, my friend.
Thank you, Isaac.
Um,
That's you are.
yeah. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate your time and being able to learn a little bit more about us as designers, as well as the Bird series. If you guys are interested in checking out the Bird series, you can go to BackerKit right now. It's currently on BackerKit, still funding there. And if you want to find out more about Rose Gauntlet, feel free to check out our website www.rosegauntlet.com or any of our social medias, which is at Rose Gauntlet. So thank you again for taking time with us today, and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.